All right. So, in the midst of Christmas chaos, well, I guess Christmas is kind of over, but it's all that in between. We took 20 minutes to record a video and share it with you guys this morning so that you got a little bit of something to help us continue to grow the channel and hopefully help you grow and prepare for the year that is just mere days away. Waylon, it's funny when we talk about preparing for next year's in like a few hours. I think sometimes people forget that this time of year, right?
It's crazy. Yeah. I mean, it's easy to get lost in the cycle. Like Christmas feels like it's one day, but it feels like so much more than that. And then it's like the highs and lows of emotions that come from it. And then you filter all that out, get all the family out of the house, clean up all the wrapping paper, and then boom, it's New Year's. And everybody knows how New Year's goes. It's like the biggest excuse to drink other than the 4th of July in America. So yeah, it's always a crazy time of year.
I went out today. I was trying to be minimally productive, like that fine balance between why are you working and why are you not. And I
Mhm.
took a bunch of policies to the post office, closed. Then I was going to stop at the country store to pick up pellets for the pellet stove, closed. Like the world does not want us to be productive on some of these days.
That's the truth. It's the truth. I mean, you get all the emails too about the carriers. It's like, we're closed. And it's always arbitrary dates. Like some of them will be closed from like this past Friday till Thursday. It's like,
Mhm.
but why? Like, what's going on? Then some will be closed like one day. And it's like, this is just, I don't know who's open, who isn't. It's always crazy.
But it's important you get 32 emails letting you know when all these companies are open and closed.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I don't know what I'd do without them at this point. So it's
I
like a
mean,
holiday tradition.
Atlantic City Life is closed or Atlantic Coast Life, or I don't even know who that is and why they'd be open for me to worry about today. So we were doing a conversation this morning on the agency call that I think would be good for the public consumption as well, talking about taking personal stock in your goal. Like it's fun to write a number on a piece of paper, but taking it to that next level is what oftentimes people fail to do and why they fail to ever achieve that goal. So, what did you mean when you were talking earlier today about taking personal stock in your goal?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of the things that people lose sight of, kind of like we talked about when people are setting goals. It's really an attractive thing this time of year, New Year's resolutions, all that stuff. And it's easy to get excited for anybody. Like when you write down a goal, it's exciting. It should be. You should be excited, like, oh, this is going to be awesome. Because all your brain's doing is thinking, what am I going to do once I hit this? It's going to be awesome once I hit this. And what I mean by personal stock is like sit down and think about what you've done the past 60, 90, 120 days and then think about the goal that you just wrote down or thinking about writing down and like realistically think like have I shown myself that I'm even semi capable of achieving that? Because any goal is going to have a lot of steps to it. And if, like I said on the call, like if you wrote 20,000 the last 60 days, but your goal is to write 450 grand next year, like okay, is it possible? Sure. Is it likely? No. Like, I'm sorry, but you're a good agent. You're not buying 80 leads a week and working your face off, or you would be writing more than 20 grand every 2 months. So take stock in a personal sense of make it personal and understand what you've done or didn't do previously to see if it's even a realistic thing to even put out there in the ether. So that's what I mean.
Yeah, sometimes a goal that you can't achieve or is impossible to achieve or is really not within your capacity to achieve is more dangerous than not having a goal at all.
Yeah.
Like let's say a new agent wrote about 10K a month. They're just starting to get their feet settled. They're just getting by. Like 10K a month is just more than you make at any other job, but the minimum you need to really make to be sustainable in this job. And then they say to themselves, I want to write 400K. You don't have the skill set. You haven't gotten close to achieving it yet. Like it's okay to be reasonable and achievable with your goal and not something that you just don't have the capacity to achieve yet.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, there's a lot of things that need to be taken into account when even writing up goals, thinking about goals. But the biggest thing is internally, like I said, I mean, just like you said, being unrealistic and setting a crazy goal can almost do more harm than it can help because you're just overreaching in all aspects of life that are required to reach it. And at each step along the way, you're overreaching so much that one, you'll either burn out and just fizzle out and be done, or two, you'll be so disappointed in yourself that you didn't reach this insane goal that even when it's going well, you'll have this idea that the industry sucks and things are terrible and the house is on fire. Like it's not always, it's just a fine line.
So next one, why does it even matter? Like I think a lot of times agents with the capacity to achieve it, with the skill to achieve it, with the drive to achieve it, they never achieve it because the goal really didn't matter when the rubber hit the road, not to use an incessant amount of bumper stickers. But have you noticed that there's agents that had what it took, but the goal really didn't matter enough for them ever to achieve when it got complicated?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That's what differentiates a good goal and a bad goal most times. I mean, any goal takes some thought or it wouldn't be a goal. But when there's emotion attached to it, something that means more than simply a number on a sheet of paper or a plan, even like if writing 150K means being able to buy your dream house or being able to fulfill like some kind of self-actualized thing, right? Like that's the top of the hierarchy of human needs. It's a thing that we learned in business school that I think is a great tool. Like if you're self-actualizing and you writing 150K allows you to spend more time with your children or buy some equipment for some athletics that your children are in for them that you wouldn't have been able to get, or provide a better Christmas than they got this year, or everybody's different. Could be pay rent for your mom or pay for your grandparent that's in a nursing home, like all these different things, right? Everybody's perspective is different. But if you're making 150K to buy your seventh watch, I mean, unless you really love watches, the likelihood of it, the days where it's like, I don't really want to do it today and it's Friday and you're like, I'm good. I got 5 Rolexes. I don't need a 6th. But if it's Friday and you need to make an extra 3K to pay off grandma's dining bill at the local nursing home, you can pretty damn well bet you're not going to give a shit how you're feeling. You're going to go.
Yeah.
So that's what can give you that extra nudge just to get those days, because every day adds up.
I think the goal, whatever goal you decide to write down on pen, paper, notability, whatever this week, needs to be bigger than yourself. Like, why, when it's past me, what's next? When I don't feel like it, when I don't feel good, when the weather's nice, when the weather's bad, whatever the 100 list of excuses are that people use, you can get to the goal when that goal is more than just yourself. You also said this morning, what happens if it doesn't happen?
Mhm.
Like, people oftentimes want to write it down, they want to achieve it, but they don't think about what happens if this doesn't take place. What did you
Yep.
mean by that?
Yeah, I think that almost is as important and maybe even more so important than the goal itself. Because again, our brain immediately is going to say, I got this goal, I want to make $100,000. And you look at that and you turn it into reality almost. If you look at it enough, you're like, oh man. And that's part of the beauty of goal setting is it's like, this is what I'm going to do once I've made it. But think about this. When you're setting these boundaries, if you will, and your rules for reaching that goal, think about again your past 60, 90, 120 days last year, what you did and didn't do. And think about if you don't do those things. What is worst case scenario? If you stay on that path, that track of least resistance and don't follow through on any of the steps required to reach your goal, where are you then? For a lot of people in the business, if you don't do those things for 12 months, you're out of business. You're no longer an insurance broker or an agent. And you're blaming people. You're angry with this, angry with that. This carrier is bad. My upline stunk. The leads were awful. Insurance is a scam, whatever, all that stuff. I mean, if you continually don't follow through and you're consistently inconsistent, what does that look like? Like literally think about it. Write that out like you write your goal. Like in 12 months, if I write $3,000 a month and spend $2,000 a month on leads, I made 20 grand this year. What is my spouse going to think? What is my family going to think? Not only what are they going to think, what are they going to do? What is my landlord going to think? What is the mortgage company going to say? What does that look like? Like what is doomsday? Right?
Mhm.
Because you got to be running from something. The fastest I've ever ran was when a dog got loose in my neighborhood and I ran from it. I was like 11 or 12 years old. And I still don't think I've ever ran that fast in my life. That just goes to show you I wasn't running, and I was running to home. I wanted to get home so I didn't get eaten alive by this dog that I, in my imagination, thought was the biggest dog ever. It's not really, but you get what I'm saying. Like running from something is almost as powerful, and maybe for some of us more powerful than running to something. So having that push and pull is a great thing.
I wrote down, I was trying to draw a picture of this. It's just not working. I feel like there's a lot of agents too that they kind of like have this perpetual upswing where they get to a point, and if they could go a little bit further, they'd find this new glass ceiling they broke and this new level of consistency. But they get all the way up to here and then they stop, they take time off, they get sick, they get full of excuses. Then they go all the way back to the very beginning of where they were in the very beginning. And then like that's
Mhm.
a lot of people I keep seeing follow this perpetual cycle of it gets close to Thanksgiving, I pull the plug, and before you know it, by the time I push it back in, it's February and I'm back to where I was from the very beginning.
Mhm.
Do you see that a lot? Because it seems so frustrating to me to see such great potential go dormant during the winter.
A ton of that, uh, and spoke about it this morning, like planned time off is completely okay. We earn that. That's something we earn if we plan it and we do what we said we would do and follow through for ourselves. However, like you said, that perpetual glass ceiling, the biggest the biggest downside of that process is you reach this higher level of understanding of ability in the business. You're like, man, I'm a consistent 20K a month, 25K a month producer. Now, mentally, in your head, you're an above average to elite producer. You're very good. But guess what happens when you take 3, 6 weeks off and chargebacks hit and doomsday hits? You come back, your brain still thinks you're that elite producer, but you're not. I'm sorry, but if I took 6 weeks off of managing, I wouldn't be a very good manager for like coming back that first couple of weeks.
Yeah.
So realistically, all you're doing is getting at war with your ability. And believe me, managing someone on that level is really difficult because it's like, how do I politely tell you that you're not that good right now? And you take it well because you wrote 25K in October, but you haven't worked since, October 24th. And now it's January again. Um, Not only that, but, on a mental, emotional level, but on a financial level. Let's say you write 3 to 5 carriers. Well, now you're shopping carriers on Facebook because Johnny Be Good wants to give you this carrier from Minneapolis, Minnesota that no one has, and like
For good reason.
get advanced with them. But then you've got debt that rolls up, and it's a shit show. Really, is the best way to explain it. But it's so many different levels. But mostly that mental, emotional side of it's hard to snap out of that just period of the vacation period, basically the mental vacation. You take the foot off the gas. It's really, really hard to find the gas pedal again.
I was sitting here at my desk between activities today doing little tiny things so that when I get back from vacation, I'm going to have less of these menial tasks to do. I can get
Mhm.
back into production a lot quicker. Like my leads are already cut out, but they're not going to be worked for this week and a little while. Like just these
Yep.
little things like cleaning up emails and putting down deposits on sheets, like mail-in
Mhm.
policies, like the little things that get in the way of productivity need to be done right before you take time off too. Um,
Mhm.
you said something a moment ago that I think is valuable, like saying to somebody, you're not really who you think you are yet. You're not really who you think you are at this moment. You're not who you were 6 months ago. And then how some people have difficulty receiving that information, right?
Absolutely. So, I mean, it just goes anything you're learning, like you can't be an elite at anything unless you're willing to suck at it first. So, when I started at this, I sucked. I was not good, but I got really good eventually over time after running my head into the wall several times a week, several times a day, 30 times a week for a couple years. Same thing with this, and it's muscle memory. Like I was really good at basketball one time. Then I wasn't very good because I started to lift weights and I sucked at basketball. Then I started playing again and it humbled me. Like, man, I got to get this muscle memory back. Now I'm decent again. Same thing goes with this. But telling someone that it's humbling and it's hard to check your ego at the door when at once upon a time you were an elite, above average, or strong person in the industry. So from both sides of it, from the managerial side as an upline or as a partner or whatever, it's tough to have that conversation. But as the individual yourself, it's hard to think about that too. Like, man, I was so good at this. What happened? Well, what happened is you just got lazy. Like you weren't working, you weren't doing the things that made you good in the first place for very long for periods of time. So yeah, it's a difficult conversation and hard to get across to people. That you're meaning it from like a genuine perspective of like, look, you got to kind of suck again for a little while and get back to what you're used to.
I also think it, and I could be wrong, feel free to disagree, like we did agree, disagree last week, that the ability to communicate that to somebody comes from a well-rooted, as you said this morning, well-watered relationship. And I
Mhm.
feel like because so many relationships in our industry are short-lived, you never develop the roots, you've never watered the relationship, you've never built the skin tough enough for you to tell each other that kind of thing. Because people are constantly going from one place to the next, never giving each other the chance to develop that level of honesty without being offended.
Exactly. It's, conflict is necessary in any quality relationship. If you're not willing to have conflict and thus try and find resolution, your relationship was never that strong to begin with. At the end of the day, if people want to use an initial conflict as the only reason they don't want to work with you, be with you, whatever, that relationship was never that strongly rooted to begin with. So, uh, risking being a little offensive is kind of necessary at times with certain people.
Yeah.
Certain people different feedback better, and that's just how it is. And as you said, uh, that's how this industry has become. Is like as soon as my manager, upline, whatever, has a different mindset than I do or feels differently about something, I want to just call the next upline that's available because there's a ton of us out here.
Mhm.
So that isn't always the right answer because a problem is going to arise with them as well. And just like anyone who's worth anything, they're going to try to solve the conflict or the issue with a little bit of conflict. I mean, you got to kind of grow up and handle it that way.
I think too, when people try to jump from one spot to the next, what they fail to see is that there isn't a ton of deviation in what people at that next tier really do. They have a very similar structure, a similar routine, a similar methodology. They might say potato and you might say potato, but is there that substantially different a style between what Waylon and Wayne Daniel, or what Waylon and Scott, what Waylon and Eric, what Waylon and Adam, what Waylon and Sean, like these other names out in the industry? There really probably isn't that much of a deviation.
No, there's not. There's not. I mean, there's different styles.
Mm-hmm.
I think stylistically is the biggest thing. Like you said, tomato, tomato, potato, potato. Like, stylistically, I think people can differ quite a bit. But I think the principles are all pretty much the same. Like it's and a lot of it's just psychological based, honestly. At a certain extent, it's like how you treat people, how you resolve conflict, how you manage things, how you stay on top of things and communicate with people. It's the big one. So yeah, I think stylistically is the biggest differentiator there on how people get their point across. I think some people do it much differently than
Oh
others.
yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's about getting your point across and moving forward from things.
I think it's also important as we look to wrap up our conversation on goals and start moving into an implementation type conversation in the weeks ahead. People get so wrapped up in, gosh, I got to do this for 365 days, 52 weeks, 7 times, whatever. But you really just have to do it for January. Like you just have to build the habit between now and 12, 126 or whatever. And then
Yep.
all of a sudden, 1 month becomes two, becomes three, becomes a habit, and then you're set. Like, don't worry about running the next 12 months of this brand new goal. Worry about running it now, and then it'll all work itself out. Like, I think people forget the power of habit building and how easy good and bad habits are. You just have to build your 2023 habits for a 1 month period.
Absolutely. And even more than that, break it down as small as you can. Like as small as you can. You can't think about the year in a whole year perspective. Even I don't do that. Like I can't think about what I have no idea what's going to happen next September, next November. I have no clue. I have no clue. Like we just came out of a pandemic. Like I have no idea I have no idea. And if somebody says they do, they're insane.
Mhm.
So break it down to like a day if you're an agent. Like what? Okay, I want to write this much this year. What's that a month? What's that a week? All
Mhm.
right, now who is doing that? All right, hey buddy that does this, how many leads a week do you get and what's your schedule?
Mhm.
Okay, this guy works 5 days a week and he dials on these days and runs the field these days.
Do that.
Do that. Start with
Mhm.
the first dial day and do that and mark that off your calendar. Then run the field and do that. And then the next day, run the field and do that. Like, don't think about it. Even, and that's one of the biggest issues too financially for agents is I get that a lot of us get in the industry from a financial need perspective. However, if you look at a lead pack, your leads based off of 7 days or 14-day financial success, then it's just going to be tough. you got to look at it, from a, 30, that's the only time you want to look at things from a larger perspective is like a monthly or
Mhm.
quarterly perspective on what your return on investment is. But as far as you and what you can control, take it literally day by day, like little bites, little tiny bites every day out of that goal. So
I got
yeah, yeah,
very,
good.
very true. I got one last question that I was texted in this morning from somebody in my group that I think is beneficial for the audience to listen to here because I want to make sure this goes up today and not a week from now. Question was, hey Chris, do you think it's a good idea to be in the field this week, or do you think people are checked out for the week until next year? Waylon, I'll tell you how I answer that question. Then I'm curious what you would say. I'm sure it's probably going to be very similar, but somebody watching this video needs to hear this question answered for them as well. I said I would absolutely be in the field if I were you. When I was in my infancy in the business, I worked holidays, weekends, and every day I needed until I didn't have to worry about how much things cost. In fact, for many of the people you'll see, it's just Monday for them. It's just Monday for most people in the world, and it's just Monday. So, how would you answer the question? Is this week a good idea for me to be in the field?
I would actually answer the question with a question
Mhm.
first, just to get feedback from that agent to see where they're at mentally. I would just say something along the lines of, well, what were you? I know you're asking me, and I understand, but if someone asked you, what would you say? I always like to ask questions when I'm not too busy to actually like. Sometimes if I'm super busy, I would just answer it and be done with it. But if I wasn't super busy, I would say, okay, well, I get it. But if someone asked you, would you go to work? And then I would say something, I would kind of tell them in a form of a story a little bit. Like I have a sister. She has a pretty good job. She's salary, but guess where she's at today? She's in
She's
the
working.
office. She's
Mhm.
in the office. She had to go in. Required. She had to drive 45 minutes from southern BFE, Ohio to Columbus and go into the office. That's first things first. Second thing, which this is more of a helpful thing, we work with people that get the same amount of money on the first, the third, or one of the Wednesdays every month.
Mhm.
And one of the Wednesdays is, I think, the fourth Wednesday of the month is in a couple of days. So it might be. I don't know. I don't know. Those Wednesday dates always drive me nuts, but whatever. They're coming up. So somebody might be getting paid in 2 days. So the money that ain't changing. Did they maybe buy some stuff for Christmas? Sure. But guess what? Next month, that same amount of money is coming into the bank account. And most of the stuff we write, we're post dating anyways. We're not drafting it today.
Mhm.
So why wouldn't you go out? I mean, you don't have to if you don't want to make money. Sure, that's no problem. Like if you don't want to make any money today,
You
you don't
don't
have to.
need to. That's
You don't
okay.
know. It isn't necessary. But again, I can't say it enough. How you finish this year is how you're going to start next.
Yeah.
Why not get a head start on it? So the short answer is, yeah, go in the field.
Yeah.
Like so.
It's also a lot of personal reflection, not reflection, but it's depending on where you are in the cycle of the business. Are you brand new and every app pays every bill? You should probably be in the field. Are
Absolutely.
you restarting your career, struggling in your career, like you're not quite there yet? You should
Mhm.
probably be in the field a good portion of this week. If you are all your bills are paid, your card's still going to clear when you're charged for leads, your business is under control and you've scheduled the time, take the time. But have a good working and honest and self-accountable assessment of where you are and then answer that question as well. Because I kind of looked at it, forgot to say this was an agent that's new in the industry. This isn't
Mhm.
like a 20-year veteran who I know is getting
Yeah.
20 grand in Medicare money next month, makes 6 grand a week. He's fine. Like everybody is in a different spot, and you have to be
Yep.
careful not to measure yourself against other people in their journey as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's very smart. I mean, that's why I kind of, would frame it as a question first, just not knowing where they stand. Like, if I just have relationships with most of our agents and I kind of know where they're coming from if they text
Mhm.
me that question.
Yeah.
And certain people, it's like, yeah, go to work. You
Yeah.
goofball. Yeah, bought leads in 2 weeks. Like freaking go to work. Like, so it just depends exactly where they're at in their career.
Don't mess with the elf that makes the mail work because it could
Exactly.
disappear and then all of a sudden you don't have leads when you need them. Gosh, that's a whole different conversation on the voodoo of direct mail.
Yes. Yes. There's not enough time in the day to figure that calculus out. It's elf off the shelf if you don't buy leads on your Friday. So
Literally. Alrighty, well, appreciate you guys watching. Like the video, comment below on something you'd want us to talk about, subscribe. Maybe if there's a guest you want us to interact with, have them send us a message. We continue to grow this. We went from a mere 60 subscribers on Thanksgiving break to over 110. It's nothing in the grand scheme of YouTube, but it's growth. Steady, consistent growth is what keeps this business afloat. Waylon, thanks for jumping on with me for a few minutes, and we'll see everybody back next week.
Absolutely. Thanks, Chris.